I had been looking forward to that day for weeks. Finally, a chance to surprise Claire on her birthday. The day had dragged on, filled with mundane tasks and the weight of routine, but the thought of the gift I had hidden in my briefcase kept my spirits up. The necklace I had chosen for her was perfect, something I knew she would love. It wasn't just about the gift. It was a symbol of how much she meant to me. I was eager to get home, to see her face light up, and to enjoy a quiet evening together. As I walked through the door, the familiar sounds of laughter and conversation drifted from the kitchen. Claire and our daughter Lily were in the middle of a conversation, their voices filled with warmth and ease. At first, everything seemed normal, even pleasant. I paused at the hallway, just out of sight, hoping to surprise them, but something caught my attention. "I can't believe how much I missed you last night." Claire's voice carried through the house, her tone teasing and flirtatious. "You really know how to make a night unforgettable." I froze. The words echoed in my mind, and I stood there confused. My heartbeat quickened as I listened more closely. "What do you mean, Mom?" Lily's voice, youthful and unsure, answered Claire's comment. "I mean, your friend Matt is just so different. I didn't know he could be that talented," Claire continued, her voice lowering slightly, almost too intimate, like she was letting Lily in on some secret. "Last night was unexpected in all the right ways." My stomach dropped. The joy of returning home, the excitement of the surprise, quickly faded into a storm of confusion and dread. What was going on? Matt? Why would Claire be talking like that about someone I didn't even know well? I stood frozen, a wave of suspicion crashing over me, threatening to drown my thoughts. I hadn't even noticed my own fingers tightening around the doorknob. Who was she talking about? And why did it sound so intimate? I needed to know more, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear the rest. Lily's voice interrupted my thoughts again. "I knew you'd like him, Mom. He's perfect for you. Not like Dad. He gets it." The words stung, each one a dagger that seemed to twist deeper into my chest. What was happening? I felt paralyzed as I stood there, hidden behind the corner, my mind racing through a dozen possibilities. Was this a joke? Had they been planning something behind my back, or was there more to this newfound connection with Matt? I had always trusted Claire, trusted her implicitly. But now, everything seemed to be crumbling before me. Slowly, I backed away from the kitchen, retreating to the living room, my heart pounding in my ears. My mind churned with disbelief. This wasn't just about some misunderstanding anymore. This was about my marriage, my family, everything I had built. I couldn't just ignore it. I needed answers, real, concrete proof. I couldn't confront her with just a gut feeling, even if my instincts were screaming at me to do so. That night, as Claire and Lily went to bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The necklace I had so carefully chosen for Claire felt like a burden now, a symbol of everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Claire's words, her laughter, echoed in my mind, her voice so light, so carefree, while I felt like my world was slipping out of my hands. Tomorrow, I promised myself. Tomorrow, I would start looking for the truth. Over the next few days, I kept a close watch on Claire and Lily. I tried to maintain some normalcy, acting like everything was fine, but inside, I was unraveling. Every glance between Claire and Lily, every late night out, every phone call that seemed a little too secretive, everything started to feel like a piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve, but had no choice but to face. One evening, after Claire had gone to bed, I found myself in the kitchen. Claire's phone was lying on the counter, charging, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether I was ready to uncover whatever truth lay hidden there. But the temptation was too strong. With a shaky hand, I picked it up and unlocked it, my heart hammering in my chest. I scrolled through her messages, hoping against hope that I was wrong. But there it was, a series of texts from someone named Matt. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. "You were amazing last night," one message read. "I can't stop thinking about you." Another followed. "Can't wait to do it again." The words felt like daggers, each one digging deeper into me. I had suspected something was wrong, but this was undeniable. Claire was having an affair, and it wasn't just a random fling. It was someone she had been seeing for months, someone who clearly meant more to her than I had realized. I took clicks of the messages, making sure I had solid evidence. I couldn't confront her without it. The anger and betrayal that swelled inside me were overwhelming. But amid the chaos, a plan began to take shape. I wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. I wouldn't let Claire think she could get away with it. The next day, I confronted Lily. She was sitting at her desk, studying for an upcoming exam. When I knocked on her door, she looked up in surprise, her eyes a little wary. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft and unsure. "Lily, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About your mom." Her face went pale, and she closed her laptop quickly, a mixture of apprehension and guilt flickering across her expression. "Lily, I found something," I said, showing messages. "Do you want to explain this?" Her face went even paler as she looked at the screen, and her eyes widened with horror. She took a step back, her voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't want you to find out like this," she stammered. "I didn't know what to do. Mom, she was lonely, and Matt, he's just a friend. I thought it would make her happy." "Happy?" I repeated, my voice growing sharper. "Is that what you think? Helping her cheat on me is helping her?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to fix things, Dad. I thought maybe if I just kept quiet, things would get better. But it didn't work." I stood there, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Lily wasn't at fault here. She was just caught in the middle, trying to protect her mom while watching our family fall apart. I took a deep breath and softened my tone. "Lily, I know you were trying to help, but we need to deal with this together. We have to talk to Mom." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Dad. I never meant for this to happen." "I know, sweetie," I said quietly, placing my hand on her shoulder. "I know." That evening, as Claire came home from work, I asked her to sit down. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. When Claire entered, she could sense the tension between me and Lily. Something was wrong, and she knew it. "What's going on?" Claire asked, setting her bag down. She looked between Lily and me, concern starting to creep into her voice. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with hurt. I handed her the phone. "Do you want to explain this?" Claire's face went pale as she took the phone from me. She scanned the messages, and the color drained from her face. She looked up at me, her hands trembling. "Tom, it's not what you think," she said, her voice shaky. I shook my head, my anger bubbling to the surface. "Then tell me what it is, Claire. Who is Matt?" She hesitated, looking at Lily, who was sitting in silence, guilt written all over her face. Then Claire sighed, her shoulders sagging as she finally spoke. "Tom, Jake is just a friend. It's complicated, okay?" She looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "I messed up. I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "Now we need to deal with it." The room fell silent as I stared at Claire, her tears welling up as she tried to explain herself. I couldn't listen to her anymore. The betrayal was too deep, and I needed space to think. "I need time to think," I said finally. "I'll be staying at David's for a while." Claire nodded silently, unable to look me in the eye. As I left the room, Lily reached out to me, her voice full of regret. "I'm sorry, Dad. I never wanted this." "I know, Lily," I said softly, squeezing her hand. "We'll get through this, together." The following days passed in a haze of anger, hurt, and a desperate need for clarity. I stayed at David's house trying to keep my emotions in check. His place was a refuge, a place where I could escape the weight of my shattered marriage, even if only temporarily. David had been my friend for years, and through this ordeal, he had proven to be a constant source of support. "You don't have to decide anything right now," David would tell me, trying to calm my nerves. "You need time to let this settle, but when you're ready, we'll make sure you handle this the right way." It was the advice I needed, but the storm inside me wasn't so easily calmed. Claire had betrayed me in the most profound way possible, and I couldn't just let it slide. Every moment I spent thinking about her affair with Matt, the more the desire for revenge grew inside me. It wasn't about just punishing Claire. It was about making sure she understood the gravity of what she had done, and ensuring she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. I spent sleepless nights going over the details in my head. I had evidence now, screenshots of the incriminating messages. It wasn't just about confronting Claire anymore. It was about taking control of the situation and ensuring that the fallout hit her as hard as it had hit me. She had betrayed my trust, and she needed to feel the weight of that betrayal in every corner of her life. One evening, as I sat in David's living room, my phone buzzed. It was Claire. My heart skipped a beat, but I knew this moment would come. I had been preparing for it. I picked up the phone, my voice cold when I spoke. "Tom, I know you need time, but we need to talk." Claire's voice trembled over the line. "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you." Her words barely reached me. She had already done the damage, and no amount of regret could undo it. Still, I felt a small pang of guilt at how I had hardened myself. I had loved her, trusted her, and yet she had chosen someone else. "Claire, we need to meet," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done with the waiting. I need you to understand what this is going to cost you." I could hear the hesitation in her voice as she agreed to meet. The next morning, I returned home, walking through the door that I had once considered the heart of our family. The house felt different now, cold and empty. Claire was in the kitchen, nervously arranging some things on the counter. Her eyes flickered up when I walked in, and for a moment, I could see the vulnerability in her face. "Tom, I'm so sorry," she began, but I cut her off with a wave of my hand. "You had your chance to apologize," I said, my voice biting. "Now it's time to face the consequences." Claire's face paled. She didn't speak again as I walked past her to the living room, where I had placed a folder containing all the documents I had been preparing. The divorce papers, along with everything else that proved her affair with Matt, were ready. I'd thought long and hard about this moment. It was time for her to face the reality of what she had done. "Sit down, Claire," I ordered, my voice cold. "We need to go over a few things." Claire hesitated but sat down, her face a mask of fear and regret. I took a deep breath, looking at her for the first time in days, trying to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about making sure I took control of my life, my future, and my family's well-being. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," I began. "I wanted to pretend that none of this was real, that we could just move past it. But I've realized I can't do that. I can't move forward without knowing that you understand exactly what this is costing you." Claire's voice cracked as she whispered, "What do you mean?" "Tom, please, just listen to me. We can work through this." "No," I said firmly, my gaze locking with hers. "You betrayed me, and now you're going to pay the price." I slid the divorce papers across the table toward her. Her breath hitched as she stared at them, the realization of what was happening setting in. "Happy birthday, Claire," I said quietly, my voice void of warmth. "Consider this my gift to you. The end of our marriage." Claire's eyes filled with tears as she picked up the papers. She shook her head, unable to speak at first. "Tom, please, this can't be happening," she whispered. "I never meant for any of this to go so far." "I know," I replied coldly, my resolve hardening. "But it did, and now we have to deal with it." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "There's nothing left to save. You've made your choice." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the shock on her face as the weight of the situation set in. She had expected maybe a fight, maybe some negotiating, but not this. She hadn't prepared for the finality of the divorce papers. As Claire sat there, clutching the papers in her trembling hands, I stood up and walked towards the door. "We'll finalize everything soon," I said without looking back. "But for now, this is done. I'm done." I left the house without a second glance. Claire's pleas fell on deaf ears as I drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of our marriage. It was over. The next few days were a blur. I stayed with David, sorting through the mess of emotions and decisions that lay ahead. The legal proceedings moved forward quickly, aided by the evidence I had gathered. Claire's betrayal had been exposed, and there was no turning back. But there was still more to be done. I had always believed in the importance of fairness and integrity, but fairness wasn't enough anymore. Claire had taken what was mine, and I was going to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. I contacted a lawyer to discuss the details of the divorce and custody arrangements. I wanted to ensure that Lily was protected, that she wouldn't be caught in the crossfire of Claire's choices. I also made sure that the financial settlements were fair. Claire couldn't walk away unscathed. But the real revenge, the one that had been burning inside me since I first overheard Claire's conversation with Lily, wasn't going to come from just legal papers. It was going to come from the realization that Claire would never be the same again. Her career, her reputation, everything she had worked so hard for, would be stripped away, one piece at a time. I hired a private investigator to gather more information on Matt. It turned out that he wasn't just a random acquaintance. He was involved in several business ventures that Claire had known about for months. The PI also uncovered a trail of evidence that tied Matt to some questionable financial dealings. The pieces were falling into place. With that information, I made a call to the authorities, ensuring that Matt's business dealings would come under scrutiny. I wasn't going to let him get away with it either. If Claire thought she could betray me without consequences, she was wrong. The final blow came when I was contacted by a journalist who had gotten wind of the story. They wanted to cover the scandal, Claire's affair, her role in the business dealings with Matt, and the aftermath of the betrayal. The story would be covered nationally. I didn't hesitate for a second. It was time for the world to know what had happened. When the story hit the news, Claire's world crumbled. Her friends distanced themselves from her, her professional connections began to fall apart, and the reality of her actions hit her hard. I made sure that every detail of her affair was publicly known, including her involvement in Matt's illegal business dealings. There was no escaping it. Months passed, and the divorce was finalized. I had full custody of Lily, and Claire was forced to accept the terms of the settlement. She had lost everything, her marriage, her reputation, and her family. I wasn't the only one who suffered from her betrayal, but I would be the one to rebuild. Lily and I settled into a new life, one that was still filled with pain, but also with the hope of a fresh start. David remained by my side, offering support when I needed it most. As the dust settled, I realized that the most important thing was rebuilding the trust I had lost, not just with Lily, but with myself. I had learned a hard lesson about betrayal, about trust, and about the lengths to which people will go to protect themselves. But I also learned that revenge, while sweet, could only take me so far. The true healing would come from moving forward, from taking control of my life and my future. As I looked out over the horizon, I knew one thing for certain. I was done with the past. I was ready to rebuild my future on my terms.